Hello, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, wherever you are. And then welcome to one of our Trau Nutrition's Global Webinar Series of 2021. And then today we are going to have a webinar from Global Cellco Feed Additives team. And then today's webinar, we are going to talk about immune response ability and beyond. This is actually one of the IntelliBond abilities webinar series. So I would like to welcome all of you and then stay tuned for very interesting presentations by our two very nice speakers for today. And then before we start, I just would like to test if you can see my screen, if you can see me, or if you can hear me well. Can you hear me, Davi, and also Sandra? Can you hear me, or can you see my screen?
Yes, Cici, I can see your screen, see you, and hear you very well.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, before we start, first of all, you will see here in the left, this is actually the panel of your GoToWebinar. And then, of course, you can raise questions during our presentations of our webinar today. And then our speakers will be answering all of your questions. And then you can put all of your questions in the questions menu here. And then we are going to have questions and answer sessions after the presentations. And then both webinar will be recorded. And then both webinar records and also handouts will be available upon request. And then what you also need to know about this webinar is that please note that all of those product names and also claims mentioned in this webinar are very generic and can differ from each of the countries. So please do contact your local local Cellco or Trau Nutrition representative to discuss about your options and your needs. And without further ado, I just would like to remind you once again that this is actually one of the IntelliBond Abilities webinar of 2021. And then we have come to almost the end of our webinar series. Today, we are going to talk about the immune response ability, one of the abilities of IntelliBond. And then there are two more webinars coming, which is going to focus on efficiency, on processing and optimizations, and also the efficiency on productions optimizations. So make sure you are tuned in our LinkedIn because we are going to share all of the links for you to register to these upcoming webinars. And then it is I'm very glad that I'm going to introduce to you our speakers for today. We have Sandra Villagomez Estrada. So she is a researcher and she is originally from Ecuador, but at the moment she is located in Barcelona, Spain. And then second speaker, we have Davi Brito. He is our Global Trace Mineral Program Manager of Trau Nutrition. He's originally from Brazil. Now he's located in the Netherlands. And what are the Yes, those are our two speakers for today. What are the agenda for today? It is very interesting that we are going to have a couple of sections. We are going to start with boosting animal health, and then immune and antioxidant function. Trace mineral roles in monogastric animals. We are going to discuss also about trace mineral roles. Of course, we are going to conclude everything in the take-home message. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Sandra Villagomez to start the presentations. Let me know if everything is okay, Sandra. I'm going to give the control to you.
Thanks, Cici. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. I'm very glad to be here, joining with you this webinar. So I hope you can enjoy this webinar as much as I do. As Cici already said, my name is Sandra Villagomez, and I'm doctor in animal production. So for today, I just wanted to start. Just a moment, because I'm taking the control now. Okay, so to start, to begin, we have to remember, we must remember that in 2021 and onwards, there are several concerns, there are several challenges for animal production. Besides the important one that is economy, we are always pursuing animal efficiency, effectiveness, but besides this, we have also other pressure, other challenges, such as public health, in order to, to reduce antibiotic use, also the pharmacological doses of zinc, of copper, and there are also several concerns from consumers. They are not only aware from public health, but also for animal welfare. And finally, there is an intensive pressure in animal production to reduce the impact of this production into the environment, in order to reduce the nutrient excretion, but also to reduce the greenhouse gases. So if we have to summarize all these points, we are talking about that animal production must be sustainable. So in this way, how can we get this? Well, animal production must take a full advantage for the 4 pillars of animal production, such as the genotype or the genetic potential of animals, of course, with good farm management practices, but also with nutrition and together with health. And in this regard, with this last, health, if we have to define health, perhaps the concept is that is the state allowing the highest productivity of the animal. So right now, when we are talking about health, we are focusing increasingly on prevention rather than cure. So in this context, therefore, boosting animal health must be one of our 4 main concerns, because the importance behind the animal health, there is, for example, an economic purpose. We want to reduce production losses, minimize treatment costs, but also we have responsibilities such as with public health, also environmental and animal welfare. So in this context, in this way, how can we feed health? Well, before to start thinking in health, we have to remember that gut is the key concept for animal growth. And in this sense, if we are able to feed the gut, we are going to feed also health. So in the diet and in feed formulation, we must meet the nutrient requirements regarding to energy, amino acids, vitamins, but also trace minerals. How can we do this? We need to choose high quality ingredients, of course, and also we have the opportunity to employ several synergistic strategies. In general, this is important for all phases and all species, but perhaps it's more important, or it could be more focused on critical phases, such as gestation, parturition in mammals, but also in another stressful periods that will be management changes, during vaccination, when we are going to change the diet, or when animals are suffering external changes, such as heat stress, for example, during the summer season. So one of the bases of the health is the immune system, of course, and in this regard, immune competence, which might be defined as the capacity of the body to produce an immune response to an antigen or to against an invader. So in this way, all biological systems have 3 main responses, or 3 main systems. The first one is the innate system. This innate system is non-specific. Here we can find, for example, tight junctions, mucins, gut microbiota, and also we have passive system, which is temporary. This is the one that we acquire, for example, through colostrum. And lastly, we have the adaptive system. This is perhaps the highest response, the highest immune response, when a highly virulent pathogen overwhelms the system. So in any case, when an invader, when an antigen enters to the body, the immune cells, are going to detect this and initiating the inflammatory response. So to illustrate this better, I'm going to show you this graph. Here we can see the immune response against two infectious microorganisms, in this case E. coli and pears. In one hand, we have E. coli. E. coli, is the most common pathogen involved in post-weaning diarrhea, for example, in piglets, and it's characterized to have these molecules, lipopolysaccharide molecules, on the outer surface. However, these lipopolysaccharide molecules are not exclusive for E. coli, are also present in other gram-negative bacteria. So when E. coli enters to the body, these lipopolysaccharide molecules, these antigens, are going to be binded by a specific protein. In this case, lipopolysaccharide binding protein. And from the macrophagy side, macrophagy is going to activate toll-like receptors. These receptors are going to detect the antigen, and it's going to activate, or it's going to initiate an intracellular signaling pathways that ultimately lead to the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. On the other hand, we have, for example, in this case, the Pierce virus. You know, Pierce virus, it's a single-strand virus affecting swine production. And in this case, macrophages are going to express the toll-like receptor cell. Similarly, that what's seen with E. coli, and this detection is going to, this activation is going to initiate a signaling cascade that ultimately lead to the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So as you can see, when an invader enters to the body, it's going to activate several pathways that is going to start an acute phase response. This acute phase response is accompanied usually with an inflammatory response, but also with some clinical signs such as fever, and usually there is a reduction in feed intake, and linked to this feed intake, this reduction in feed intake, there is going to be also reduction in growth. In general, when the inflammatory response is activated, this is going to produce cytokines, of course. This is going to alter metabolic processes. Why? Because the body needs to repartitioning or needs to redistribute the nutrients to the immune system. So therefore, for example, the production of cytokines is going to reduce the efficiency of some anabolic hormones, and also it's going to reduce the weight gain. For instance, in broiler chickens, the cost of the response of the body to these infectious pathogens, infectious pathogen, it's more or less 90% of the total body lysine of the chicks. So this is a huge cost compared to the normal one that is 0.5 or at least 2% in normal situations. Therefore, another acute phase in animals is also oxidative stress. This oxidative stress is going to also cause nutrients to the body, and is usually characterized by an avalanche of production of reactive oxygen species. These free radicals, these species, are going to produce cell damage and tissue injury. And again, we are going to start with the inflammatory response. So these states, these are common under higher metabolic and energy demands, for instance, during lactation period, during farrowing, or during weaning. But also it's common when we have external stressors such as temperature, infectious, or even feed and space restriction. So in any case, these stressors are going to impact or are going to counterproductive the immune competence, growth, and also fertility. Thus, So in boosting this animal health, we have to take in mind that it's essential to provide a high quality diet, which provide essential nutrients in adequate amounts, but also in forms. Because otherwise, if we are providing a poor diet, this could also be considered as a secondary pathogen agent. Therefore, this is the importance that how we can feed health and how can we boost health. Now I'm going to invite my colleague Davi to explain the trace minerals as nutrients role.
Okay, Davi, I will give you the control.
Thank you, Cici. Also, thank you, Sandra, for the first part. And hello, everyone. It's nice to be back and also see a lot of friends and colleagues back to this webinar series that we are going through the entire 2021. And for those who are new, very welcome. Hope you enjoy hope you all are enjoying our webinar today. So I want to make a connection now because Sandra give a very nice introduction on the immune response, the oxidative response of the animals, mammals, and also birds. And I want to make sure we can introduce a little bit about the trace minerals here, because trace minerals plays an important role in the immune response in the health of the animals, because they have many functions, but one essential function they have, because they are a nutrient, they are required by the animals. So animals have requirements for micronutrients, for trace minerals such as copper, zinc, manganese, iron, selenium. So they need those for production, milk production or meat production. They need for growth, they need for gestation. And one important role of the trace minerals is that because they are part of many enzymes. And enzymes are proteins that make things happen in the system. So without the adequate level of the trace minerals, some of these enzymes are going to lose functionality or going to reduce the abilities. In other words, you're going to jeopardize or maybe reduce a little bit or maybe a lot some vital functions of the animals. And that's what we don't want to see in this type of livestock animals, that we are really pushing production, and they go many challenges during the production life cycle they have around. So this is the important about the trace mineral. Now I hope everyone can see my slides. I think I went maybe too fast. So I just mentioned about how essential they are, and they are important for many functionalities, vital functions. And another important thing, because we're going to show here after this introduction, health, inflammatory response, and then the trace mineral nutrition, we're going to show some results of trace mineral sources in special pigs, poultry, and also ruminants. And this is what play different now, because one thing is trace minerals, trace metals are essential, but what about the trace mineral source? So trace mineral sources are very important, because at the source, you be responsible to deliver the metal to the animal in the right spot, in the right place, in the right site of absorption, to ensure the metal is available to the animal to use as much as the animal or for the need that the animal has. So in other words, different trace mineral source can be more soluble, more stable or not, and they're gonna make this facilitate this handling during production of the supplement, the production of the feed, and also driving through the GI tract to make sure this animal can have this metal able to be absorbed in the right spot. So different sources can play differently, and then of course the results in terms of health and performance also gonna be different. So our idea here is to highlight the importance of a very good trace mineral source, which is our IntelliBond trace mineral source, our hydroxychloride source, the first hydroxychloride source available in the market with more than 200 research and published data done. So right here, we're going to highlight that, but that's what the important message is all about bonds and all about the quality of the source. Better the source, more stable the source, less reactive the source, the chance to have this metal to be absorbed by the animal when the animal need also increase. to highlight a little bit the difference between, and that's right here where I wanna make sure I can do that by using the laser point, is when you compare an organic source such as sulfate, you have the metal connect to the ligand by a weak bond, so less stability, more reactivity, and of course, even with lower price for this type of source, the end of the day, you have a lot of reaction and reduce the chance to have, in this case, the copper, but can be a manganese or a zinc. You reduce the chance of have this metal absorbed by the animal. And of course, you increase the chance to have this metal free to react to feed with vitamins, and also to jeopardize intake, and also react to the bugs in the rumen, which are going to reduce digestibility of fiber, production of volatile fatty acids. You have all that. So then the idea, and that came in the 70s with the development of the organic, let's do a stronger bond, which is called the covalent bond, as you can see here. And in this case, you could include amino acid or a proteinate to ensure you can have a more protection of this metal to be released in the right spot. So you could go better in the mixing and the handling, and also the GI tract, to ensure as soon as they reach the abomasum, they could be released, because in the abomasum, the pH is very low, and then you can break down stronger bonds such as covalent bonds. But in this case, of course, by using this type of organic sources, when I mean organic, I mean amino acids in special, or peptides, or polysaccharides, or even protein source, make two things. One is they are big molecules, so we reduce the concentration. Even if you can improve stability and reduce reactivity, the concentration go lower to 10, 20%. And of course, they are very important sources, so they are very vital, unique, like amino acids, so the price go high for twice. You have a lower concentration, which makes the unit per metal higher in price, but of course also by using a ligand like amino acid ligand, they also increase price. And then in the 90s, to make the solution, we have the hydroxide being developed, which, as you can see, they are a crystal, you have the metal connect by a covalent bond, which very strong bond, which increases stability and also reduce a lot the reactivity. To release this metal, you need a pH below 4.0 to have this dissociation, which happens after the abomasum or the stomach of the animals. And then you don't have the ligand as amino acid or a saccharide or even a peptide. In this case, you have like hydrogen, oxygen, and chloride. So in other words, it becomes more cost effective and much more high in concentration of metal, like above 50%. Just to highlight some difference in the source and how that works. So the logic behind it, then I'm gonna give back to Sandra, and she's gonna show some results in the swine research that being developed together. Just to show the difference behind, and that's the logic about the trace mineral source. In the end of the day, what you want is to deliver the metal. I'm going to talk about zinc here, but could be copper, manganese, or even other trace mineral source. In the end of the day, you want it to be in the right spot. You want it to be that in the intestine of the duodenum of the animal, where the sites of absorption of the metal happen. So in other words, if you have like a very soluble source, for example, this zinc sulfate here, you're going to have like a lot of free zinc already react with the moisture, with the environment, with water, which is going to cause a lot of clumping issues. But also during the production of the fire mineral or the premix, or even of the pellet or the feed, other reactions can come not only with other minerals, but also with fat, oils, and vitamins. So you have in the end of the day, besides losing this vitamin, all these nutrients, stability going to be reduced. You're going to have less available zinc to be absorbed in the future, because they're going to be antagonized for something else. And today, also, excuse me, I think I made sorry, I clicked wrongly here. And just today, we're not gonna. I mean, in the previous webinars, we could present more about that. But this free zinc or free metal gonna also reduce the preferential choice of palatability of some supplements and also feed in special starters, but also reduce the ability of in a ruminant animal to digest or to degrade fiber. So in other words, you're gonna reduce the production of volatile fatty acids, which is gonna be turning in growth, meat, or even milk production. And then, of course, by doing all that, you're also going to have less mineral available. In other words, when the animal needs more metals to be absorbed, you are already losing the opportunity to deliver this metal when you use a very soluble source. That's about the IntelliBond and the absorption side. So just to use this animation that Sandra have done here, and I appreciate that, Sandra, to show like we have the nutrients going through the stomach when you can have like the dissociation, correct, in the right pH, and then you have the metals able to be absorbed in a higher quantity, or at least in the quantity the animal needs, so they can go to the bloodstream and do all the functionality that you talk about, all this vital function that the metal is responsible to, like production, growth, health, reproduction. And of course, we also can reduce the risk to have more zinc or more metals of waste in the environment. And that do not apply only for zinc and copper, but also can apply for phosphorus. As much as you have less copper and zinc also react with the phytates. But at the end of the day, it's also become a more sustainable way to provide trace mineral sources to livestock animals. So now I'm gonna bring back to my colleague, Sandra, to ensure she can go through these slides now. Thanks, Sandra.
I will give you the control, Sandra.
Perfect, Cici. Thanks, David. So after this very interesting acceleration about the trace mineral sources difference, we were wondering what can trace minerals can do. And for instance, in weaning, you know, weaning is a very stressful period for mammals, where it's usually accompanied by significant gut inflammation. This gut inflammation usually is accompanied with a higher expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines. But this overproduction of pro-inflammatory cytokines are going to impair the intestinal integrity and epithelial function. So in this regard, I'm concerning about trace minerals. Zinc, several studies have pointed that zinc, just one moment, that zinc can alleviate or can mitigate this gut inflammation in these critical phases, for instance, after weaning. So, however, most of the studies have evaluated the role of zinc at therapeutic levels. If you remember what I have said before, therapeutic levels, it's not sustainable anymore, are not sustainable anymore. So in the next slides, I'm going to show you different studies with the objective to evaluate or to assess these trace minerals at lower levels. So one moment, let's be patient. Here we go. That's what I was telling you about the zinc. And of course, right now, this is not sustainable anymore. So in the first study that I want to show you, this is an interesting one, is in weaning pigs. And it's what's performed with the Oklahoma State University in the United States. And in this study, besides to evaluate the source or the influence of trace mineral source in the response of pigs, the authors have the purpose to evaluate this response under a challenge. In this case, under a lipopolysaccharide challenge. If you remember what I have said before, lipopolysaccharide challenge or lipopolysaccharide are the common antigens related to E. coli. So in this study, there was 5 diets, but right now I'm just showing you the main effect of the source. So the source was sulfate and also IntelliBond. And as a challenge, the animals were injected 4 times to produce this inflammatory response. So in the graph, in the right side, at the right side, we can see in the green bars that this is the control diet. This means that animals were not challenged. So just to be sure that there is an inflammatory response, there is a challenge for the animals. In the blue bars, we can see the response for sulfate animals, and in the green one, we can see the response of the animals fed with IntelliBone. So if we are looking at this graph of this chart, we can see that the response after this inoculation, after this challenge of the pigs regarding the production of tumor necrosis factor. Tumor necrosis factor is one of the pro-inflammatory cytokines. We can see that sulfate pigs, or the pigs that were fed with sulfate source, tended to exacerbate the production of these pro-inflammatory cytokines compared to those fed the IntelliBone diet. So right now, if we just focus in this graph, we clearly can see an influence of the trace mineral source in the inflammatory response. But if we are wondering what will happen with the growth performance of these pigs, well, after 42 days of the feeding phase, these pigs, these sulfate pigs, besides to have this exacerbation in pro-inflammatory cytokines, they also showed a lower growth performance in terms of feed intake, with the reduction of feed intake, and linked to the reduction in average daily gain. So in contrast, or in comparison with those animals fed the IntelliBone diet. So if we have to summarize, there is a clearly influence of the trace mineral source, and that in this case, the IntelliBone source can improve the productive performance of the animals, even when they are under under an immune challenge. So in the next experiment that I wanted to show you, which is published in the Journal of Animal Science and was also performed in US, and we have the honor to have one of the co-authors here in this webinar. In this study, the objective was to assess the influence of trace mineral source, but in gills. You know, breeding management, it's also an important phase in swine production. And in this case, gills were assessed the response of the immune response in front or against the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. The design was similar to the previous one. The gills were distributed or were allotted in two diets, in sulfate and IntelliBone diet, with zinc, copper, and manganese. Please note the levels. And also, as a challenge, these gills, after 15 weeks of the feeding period, these gills were orally acclimated to PET. So when we are going to see what was the response of the immune response in those gills, we can see here this graph is it's showing you the number of cycles that were required to detect the virus in both groups, in sulfate and IntelliBone. If you follow the green line, we can see that the number of cycles required to detect the virus in gills fed with IntelliBone was higher than those gills fed with the sulfate source. So if we can clearly see that the influence of in this case of the trace mineral source improve the immune system of the gills in order to eliminate the viral challenge. Another important phase, physiological phase, is the antioxidant activity. In this case, we wanted to see how was the antioxidant activity in weaned pigs. Here I'm showing you. Cici, I don't know what happened, but I cannot see my slide.
No, I'm going to put back into slideshow to assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay now?
So,
yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So in this study, this was developed in our group, in research group in Barcelona, and this study has the purpose to evaluate the antioxidant activity in winning pigs, regarding to the two sources of trace minerals. So again, notice the low levels of trace minerals. And if we see the chart, if we see the graph in the right side, we can see that the IntelliBone animals had higher levels of antioxidant enzymes, in this case, glutathione peroxidase. But if we are looking what is happening in sows, the picture is very similar. In this case, in this study that was performed by the University of Kentucky in US, the sows were fed only with copper as sulfate or as IntelliBone, and the picture is very similar. For instance, the antioxidant activity or the total content of sod and copper in sod was higher in those sows fed with IntelliBone copper. And finally, if we are wondering what is happening in broilers with this trace mineral source, we can see here in this study that it's published in the Journal of Poultry Science, that when broilers are fed with a sulfate source as zinc and copper, they showed a higher oxidative stress characterized by this biomarker, methylmalonic acid, and also by the uric acid, in comparison or in contrast with those broilers fed with the IntelliBone source. So if we have to briefly summarize, we clearly notice that there is an impact or there is an influence of the trace mineral source regarding to the immune response, but also regarding to the antioxidant activity. So right now, Davi is going to show you some interesting results in the ruminant animals.
Hello everyone, I'm back. Hope you can hear me well. I'm going to take the control back, right, Cici? Just a little bit patient here. I'm gonna bring to you guys two nice research done already published in the Journal of the Dairy Science, just to highlight also in ruminants some of the results that also we could repeat across the species, as Sandra just showed in the swine and also broiler, related to the oxidative stress and how trace mineral source can affect oxidative stress, also inflammatory response. In this case, I'm gonna use the dairy cows as the model, and I hope that can also be interesting for all of you.
I'm going to give you the control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me well, Cici? Looks like we are okay. So the first study I'm gonna show you is a study conducted by the Tom Overton Research Group in the Cornell University in the United States. So this was a transition period cow study. Dairy cows were supplemented, was assigned to 3 treatments of regarding supplementation of trace mineral source, from -28 days before parturition to 84 days in milk. And the treatments were completely inorganic treatment, where they received copper, zinc, and manganese from sulfate source. The combination of the sulfates for copper, zinc, and manganese, but also organic source. And then the third treatment, which was the complete replacement of the sulfates by hydroxychloride IntelliBond source, copper, zinc, and manganese. Okay, all the treatments were all isominerals. So the idea here is to see how the different sources can manage differently the response of these animals during the transition period. So, and I have in the bars right here 2 important formations, because we're going to talk about like how the idea is to see, okay, if the trace mineral source can be different, so perhaps also during this transition period, the oxidative stress of the cows are also different. So for here, for plasma, you use 2 different markers. One was the T-bar, the tubarbituric biomarkers, which is a very good one to show, because the T-bars really show they are the intermediate for the lipid oxidation. In other words, animals showing less T-bars means they are managing better the oxidative stress, or means they are healthier during the period as well. So as we can see in green, you see IntelliBond showing the lower levels compared to the control group. In other words, showing a reduction in the T-bars, showing that they produce less, let's say, intermediate of the lipid oxidation. Another interesting information is also the plasma total oxidant capacity, because the TAC, the TAC, is the ability to how oxidant present in plasma to inhibit the formation of oxygen intermediate. So less also means better. In other words, even for the whole study, or prepartum, postpartum, animals that receive IntelliBond as a trace mineral source supplementation could also reduce the TAC. In other words, they could really be producing less oxygen intermediate in the spirit, so showing they are much more able to control the oxidative stress during the transition period for the entire study. And beside that, we also evaluate a very important another very important biomarker, if you can say that, which is the haptoglobin, which is a cold phase protein. So haptoglobin is a very good one to evaluate, because generally animals show very low levels on when they are healthier or no stress is happening, no challenge. But as much as they have a challenge, haptoglobin goes up. So in other words, to reduce the exacerbation of the inflammation process, is always nice to have haptoglobin at lower levels, especially during this transition period. So it's an interesting marker to show how animals are healthier during the transition period as well. So in this case, compared to the combination of the trace mineral sulfate plus organic, the IntelliBond could reduce by 30%, and also is the only treatment that was below the threshold for health transition cows. So there's a threshold value between about 0.96 grams per liter of the haptoglobin in plasma. In this term is also IntelliBond treated cows could be lower than that, showing they are healthier. And by being healthier, they can respond more. And in this case, you could have an increase of production in milk for the transition cows, not only during the, sorry, I think I went a little faster. Not only during the IntelliBond helped cows reach peak milk quicker, but after the end of the experiment for the entire lactation, IntelliBond cows also produce more milk, about 1 kilogram, and that was also presented during the discussion of the article. So IntelliBond, by reducing oxidative stress, inflammation, but all beside the fiber digestibility benefit, healthier cows eating more, producing more milk during this period of transition, which is very challenging. Another study I want to bring is a very brand new one from last year. So done with Dr. Lance Baumgartner, his group in the Iowa State University in the US as well. So this was a 2x2 factorial trial where the treatments were ad libitum or feed restricted. So in other words, we're trying to really causing here some to, let's say, reduce the integrity of the intestinal cells or the intestinal tissue, and in this word, by feed restriction, you could cause that. So a 2x2 factorial study using ad libitum or feed-restricted, in other words, leak gut cows, and receiving two different sources of trace of zinc, one from IntelliBone, another one from sulfate. And to ensure the cows were feed-restricted and also had some damage in the integrity of the intestine, a protocol sorry, I tried to manage my, oh, sorry, there you go now. So a protocol using chromidity challenge was designed that has been also very developed by the group, where you can see by the offering the chromidity in the feed restricted cows, if you increase that in plasma later on, you can see what's how damaged or how the integrity of the cell wall was really reduced, because now you can go chromidity can go from the GI tract to the blood system. So just to show, of course, that's not the primary results. It's just to show like that, yes, the feed restricted cows ate 60% less the ad libitum cows, so they are really fed restricted. And because of this, also the milk yield reduced. It's just to show there's no difference between zinc source, but to show that was the goal. Okay, we're going to cause a feed restriction, just to really illustrate here, the feed restriction really caused really was about 60%. So first, because the cows were euthanized by the end, I think it's very important to show here a little bit of the morphology of the integrity of the cell wall during this between the treatments. And as you can see, some changes took place, especially in the ileum morphology. So when you compare ad libitum cow control receiving sulfates versus feed restricted control receiving sulfate, of course, feed restriction causes a reduction in the villus crypt height and depth in this ratio. And also when you compare the feed restricted cows I'm experiencing a big receiving sulfate versus IntelliBone. Oh, back. The villus height was higher, about 25%. So, and also we have some difference in the goblet cell wall, which is very important because, as we know, goblet cells are important for the MUX production, and IntelliBone fed restricted cow also increase a little bit this area as well. And as you can see here, just visualize how the integrity and also for picture and also the consistency of the cell wall and the villi of these animals, just as a visual example.
Hi, Daffy. Is
Yes,
everything okay?
I don't think my slides are moving. Can you move to me, Cici?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think in this case, yeah, if you can go again, I think, yeah, I think I need to show the complete slide. So so just to show like the plasma chromium relative to the feed restriction really shows up what we're looking for. So in other words, we could see, yes, feed restricted cow increase chromium concentration in plasma. In other words, they were really having like see this leaky gut experience. And then you can move to the next slide. And also, please, there's two other graphs together, and then you can put together. So this is also a very nice information because you have different markers for inflammation here. And of course, acute phase proteins, like I mentioned before, haptoglobin, right here, the serum amyloid A, and also the LBP, which is the lipopolysaccharide binding protein. So first thing, the lipopolysaccharide binding protein is responsible to recognize the LPS. So in other words, in this case, cows receiving IntelliBond and feed restricted. So feed restricted cows supposed to have more LPS because they were feed restricted. You have more cell, you have more bacteria death in the rumen, increase the LPS concentration. So by having this, it's good if you have a higher concentration of this because they are very anticipate the recognition of the LPS in the system. So the LBP was higher for the feed restricted IntelliBond cows. And then you can also see after 5 days of the chromium challenge, you see the cows receiving IntelliBond also reduce the production of acute phase protein as the serum amyloid A and the haptoglobin by 47% or 61%, showing as well, yes, feed restriction causes inflammation, so you have an increase of the acute phase proteins, but by having a better source of zinc, this was mitigating. In other words, the exacerbation of the inflammation was much lesser, so more energy and more the repartitioning or the use of the energy of the resource of the nutrients in the body, much better saved in this case by using IntelliBond and sulfates. Please, Cici, for the next one. So, and not different than what you see with Sandra in the case of the swine animals, the pigs. So we know first thing, haptoglobin can bind neutrophils and inhibit their activity. So we saw less haptoglobin. That's a good thing. But here also we are having two evaluating oxidative stress and neutrophil function using oxidative burst, or in other way to see respiratory burst, which is the rapid release of the reactive oxygen, such as the active oxygen species, such as the superoxide hydrogen, and especially superoxide hydrogen. So in other words, you could see a reduction here for day 5 oxidative burst. As well, we could see in special, we see a reduction in feed, sorry, let me go back. You could see a reduction in feed restriction cows, but of course, a little bit increase in the case of the IntelliBond cows. And the same thing when you're going to see for the myeloperoxidase stimulation. So these myeloperoxidase are the enzyme responsible for catalyze the formation of reactive oxygen intermediate. So in other words, by causing the leaky gut or the feed restriction, you have a reduction in that, but by using the right source, you have an improvement of that. Showing again, even for oxidative stress or for inflammation, the cows are healthier when he received IntelliBond. So, and as part of the result, that's not the paper, but that's additional information for the research. You also could reduce cows fed IntelliBond Z had 67% decrease in the relative abundance of treponema, which is a very nice information because that can be related mainly in especially foot rot and also digital dermatitis, which because treponema is the most important pathogen for those diseases. And by having healthier cows during this period, the treponema concentration was also reduced. So that's something to add when it comes to we know the importance of the digital dermatitis in herds and how treponema is a very important pathogen to be controlled. So healthier cows can do better. In receiving IntelliBond source seems to be healthier during this period of feed restriction leak gut. Cici, I think I did something here. Perhaps I have just one more slide and then we're gonna conclude it. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you then.
Can you move the slide to me, please? Oh, I think that's you. I don't think you can do, Sandra. I think it must be Cici.
Yeah, because I can.
There is a previous slide, I think. Yeah, so how could IntelliBond improve this response? So first thing, direct action at the gut level, so solubility differences. We talk about solubility at the beginning of the presentation. More available zinc along the tract means more zinc available to the enterocytes. Better enterocyte health, less bacterial infiltration, less inflammation. So improved zinc source in past literature has shown increase of gut integrity. And also better bioavailability. You know IntelliBond has superior bioavailability than zinc sulfate. That is already done with Dr. Jerry Spear group in the North Carolina state. It's already published in the Animal Feed Science Technology paper. So in this case, more available zinc during challenge state means better immune function, which means clearer infection faster and means healthier cows. So, and that is about, of course, on top of this, you have all the abilities of the IntelliBond being not reacting with essential nutrients, increase fiber digestibility, and also having more vitamin available because you reduce the chance to be have oxidation with the fat sources as other nutrients in the diet. And then I give back to my colleague Sandra to go to the take-home message of today, and then we'll finalize our presentation.
Okay, thanks, David. So just to summarize, we along of this presentation, we have seen that trace mineral sources can influence the immune response, the immune response, the animal health, and this influence is because of the chemical structure of trace mineral sources. As David already said, there is a difference in solubility. The solubility is linked to an absorption, and of course, this absorption, it's going to increase or reduce the viability. And once we have the element available for the animal, this element is going to be incorporated to several physiological functions. So as we have seen in this presentation, regarding to immune competence, microbial modulation, gene expression, and also palatability, and of course, the objective of the purpose of to use more available sources is to reduce the environmental contamination. So just keep this in mind when formulating diets for your animals. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I don't, Cici, I don't see much question here in the question box. But I have a question to make myself to Sandra.
Yeah.
Sandra,
yeah.
We in the Acute research you show. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So in the when you talk about immune competence in the data you show about the Acute when it comes to the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, we always I mean it's a lot of research has been done in terms to supplement trace minerals and also see the response when it comes more to bacteria diseases where relate to the neutrophil function and other things. And of course, we saw there is also a benefit of the overall health of the animal when it comes also to virus disease.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to elaborate that, I mean, behind that, how you see that happen, how you see the zinc or even the trace minerals playing behind the scene to really in a viral disease to be also helpful. And there's a reason I'm asking this, because consider all this coronavirus, all these things, we know minerals do not treat disease, but of course have a better immune system, gonna make you also be much more able to fight disease, or also to be protected for some virus disease, not coronavirus, but other type of flu and other things.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, David. Minerals are essential nutrients, and we have to think that minerals are essential components, nutrients, and if we are feeding our proper amounts and also sources or forms of these elements, the animal can use these elements in proper form to improve or to boost the immune system. It's like what you said. It also happened to us as humans, and also it's the same in animals. And I think there is not much studies regarding these trace mineral sources and the effect of these trace mineral sources under viral challenge, for example, and also under immune or microbial challenges. So this is important to highlight, because when we are looking in the literature for studies just to know or just to evaluate or to assess different trace mineral sources, when we are formulating diets, we cannot see so much about these functions beyond growth performance. Usually in the farm, we are focused in growth performance parameters, in feed efficiency, but there is also an important part of the animal inside of the animal, and it's related to physiological functions. So this is important to take in mind.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
I have a question here. Sorry,
yeah.
Sissy, go ahead.
Yeah, you wanted to say the questions? Yes, we received the questions here. Basically, 2 questions. Probably we could answer all of them. We have here: would you extend the response of pig against PEDV with entalabon, especially in areas where PEDV are present?
Sorry, Cici, I can't understand the question. What was it?
Would you extend the response of pig against PEDV with entalabon, especially in areas where PEDV are present?
Okay, well, we know that this virus, as well as this transmissible gastroenteric virus, it's getting more usual. It's getting common in farms. So this strategy, this nutrition strategy, should be in hand with the biosecurity practices and management. So there is not a silver bullet, but if we are able to combine these strategies, of course, we are going to see an improved response. What would I expect? Of course, if we are able to improve the environment, the farm practices, and the diet with these more available sources, we can see, we are going to see that animals are performing better. So I will expect in these endemic areas, let's see these endemic areas, I will expect an improved response. But together with improvement in farm practices, and also in biosecurity, and together with the vaccination, with the vaccines. So it's a holistic approach.
That's very good, Sandra.
Okay, you wanted to add something, Duffy?
No, just to finalize, I think that's the holistic approach when it comes to trace mineral application. Like for the leaky gut research you just present, I mean, feed restriction or variation, like a management of the feed intake across species like ruminants, even dairy or beef, is very important. We know how the fluctuation can happen. Of course, management procedures, quality of diet, quality of ingredients is very important. Many things can take place. Management of the environment, control of temperature of the environment, all that is important. But by deciding to use a better trace mineral source or a higher quality trace mineral source, also going to support you to avoid some of the problems that comes to that. You saw feed restriction cause really was low, the health ability was reduced, but by having a better trace mineral source, a little be improved. So I think the holistic approach is always something to keep in mind, and then trace mineral source can make a difference. In our case, we want to provide more and more information on our hydroxide trace mineral source, which is intelligible.
Okay, I think we are already 4 minutes after 5.
It is.
Yes. Before we close this webinar, I would like to remind you once again that we are going to have 2 more upcoming webinars on intelligible abilities. One will be in January and the other one will be in March 2022. Please make sure to stay tuned in our Trau Nutrition LinkedIn to get the registration link. And then we would like to thank you, both of our speakers, Davi and Sandra, for giving us a better nice explanations about this. And then if you have questions, suggestions, feedback, comments, please contact us in the Salcom Marcom email. So I think that was it, Davi and Sandra. And then thank you everyone for joining. I will close off this webinar. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.